imagine an outsider crime boss getting so powerful that he's got the old school Mafia capos running to the FBI for protection from his crew? Well, that's exactly what Albanian mobster Alex Rudaj pulled off when he wrestled control of the Big Apple streets with brazen ambition in the 1990s, staring down New York's most storied crime institutions and leaving them quaking in his wake. Rudaj was the alleged boss of an organized crime group called the Rudaj Organization that made its mark through violence, intimidation, and domination of illegal rackets in parts of New York. In just a few short years, Rudaj built his Albanian crew into a criminal empire capable of challenging the long-established Italian mob. He earned a reputation as the most powerful Albanian-American gangster in the city. Alex Rudaj's journey from Albanian street thug to New York godfather is one of the most dramatic organized crime stories of the 1990s. He was a gangster who wasn't afraid to use extreme violence and intimidation to achieve his criminal ambitions. His boldness in confronting the established mafia makes him a unique and fascinating figure in the history of American organized crime. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how he violently carved out his own criminal empire and challenged the Italian mob on their own turf in New York. It's one of the craziest mob stories you'll ever hear. First things first, who exactly was Alex Rudaj, and how did he get involved in New York's criminal underworld in the first place? Well, Alex Rudaj was an Albanian-American gangster who rose to become one of the most powerful and feared organized crime figures in New York City in the late 1990s and early 2000s. He was born Alexander Rudaj in 1968 in Ulcinj, Montenegro, which was part of Yugoslavia at the time. He grew up in poverty in a working-class family and turned to petty crime and gangs as a youth. He was intelligent but quick-tempered, with a reputation on the streets for violence. As a teenager, he likely ran with the street gangs in Ulcinj that were involved in petty crimes like theft, extortion, drug dealing, and more. He got a taste for the criminal lifestyle at a young age. He managed to avoid any serious run-ins with the law during his early criminal activities, but it's believed he committed assaults and possibly even serious violent crimes as part of his Albanian street gang in Ulcinj. The city was really like the Wild West of Europe at the time, a lawless place with rampant organized crime and corruption. This upbringing hardened him and prepared him for a life of crime. In 1987, 21-year-old Rudaj decided to immigrate to the United States. He made his way to New York and settled in an Albanian community in Yorktown Heights. He wasted no time in pursuing a life of crime once arriving in America. According to federal prosecutors, by the 1990s he had become a connected mob associate doing odd jobs for the Gambino crime family. He started out with small-time stuff, such as collecting debts, transporting stolen goods, intimidating business owners for protection money, and acting as an enforcer. He was able to work his way up by making himself useful to Gambino captains like Arnold Scugieri. His reputation for violence and ruthlessness impressed the Gambino leadership. His big break came around 1993 when he partnered up with an Italian-American gangster named Nardino Colotti. Rudaj and Colotti realized there was an opportunity to dominate criminal rackets among Albanian and Greek communities in Queens and the Bronx. These immigrant neighborhoods were largely overlooked by the Italian mob, so they joined forces to form their own independent crime group that became known as the Rudaj Organization, or the Corporation. It started out small, with less than 10 members, but Rudaj had grand ambitions to turn his little street crew into a powerful criminal empire. He planned to use intimidation tactics he learned growing up in Albania to expand his territory. Over the next few years, he rapidly expanded his criminal enterprise by recruiting more Albanian and Greek mobsters from New York and also importing goons from Albania. By the late 1990s, Alex Rudaj had emerged as the supreme Albanian American crime boss in New York. He commanded an army of ruthless thugs on the streets and had clearly demonstrated his willingness to use extreme violence to achieve dominance. By 2002, he had established himself as the supreme ruler of the Albanian underworld in New York City. He commanded absolute loyalty and fear from his soldiers, associates, and rivals alike. Rudaj's organization continued expanding at an astonishing rate, flooding the streets with drugs, running illegal casinos, and pulling off million-dollar heists. Their influence had now stretched far beyond the boundaries of New York into New Jersey, Massachusetts, and Pennsylvania. According to federal informants, Rudaj demanded a cut of all Albanian mob activity on the East Coast, whether gambling, extortion, or robbery. Nobody operated without his blessing, and those that defined him paid with broken bones or bullets to the head. The FBI believed Rudaj was grossing over $100 million annually by this point, all from his criminal empire. He lived lavishly, hosting extravagant parties and surrounding himself with luxury vehicles, jewelry, and expensive clothing. And yet Rudaj never lost his street edge. He was still known to shake down businesses personally if they were ever late paying protection money, and he never hesitated to order gruesome violence, including torture and dismemberment, against anyone who crossed him. During those years, Alex Rudaj had the American Mafia, law enforcement, rival gangsters, and nearly the entire Albanian underworld in America afraid of his power. His name was spoken only in whispers on the streets. Now, as Rudaj grew in power, his blatant challenge to the Italian mob's authority could not go unanswered for long. Tensions had been simmering since he started expanding his territory in the mid-1990s. The Italians saw the Albanians as upstarts and didn't take the threat seriously, initially. Violence finally erupted when Rudaj's thugs assaulted two Greek associates of the Lucchese family who were running a gambling operation in the Queens neighborhood of Astoria. A crew of Albanian mobsters, led by Rudaj himself, showed up at the Titanic Social Club armed with handguns. They brutally beat the Greek manager and bashed his head in with the butt of a pistol. This sent him to hospital. However, the brazen Rudaj was just getting started. The most infamous incident, he strolled arrogantly into the legendary Italian mob hangout, Rayo's, in East Harlem, with 20 armed Albanian gangsters. He demanded to be seated at the table reserved for John Gotti and the Gambino crime family. This flagrant disrespect of Rayo's finally caused the Italian mob to snap. After all, Rayo's was sacred ground where high-ranking Mafia members dined regularly. The staff knew them by name. Legend has it Rudaj refused to leave Rayo's until the frightened manager relented and offered him the Gotti table out of fear for his life. He stayed for over an hour with his crew, spending lavishly on food and drinks to celebrate disrespecting the Gambino family on their own turf. Messages were sent from the Gambino leadership to him, warning him to stand down after this outrageous incident, but he felt emboldened and would not back off. Some crime experts allege Rudaj even threatened to blow up the gas station where Gambino representatives met with him to discuss his reckless move at Rayo's. He had made it clear neither he nor his Albanian mob would bow to the Italian Mafia's authority in New York. They would continue expanding through brute force unless someone stopped them. The Italian families realized Rudaj's outfit needed to be eliminated. He had become too violent and arrogant. His challenge to their power and disrespect of Mafia traditions could no longer be tolerated. With tensions reaching a boiling point on the streets, the FBI had finally taken notice of Rudaj's rising criminal empire. New York's Italian Mafia families may have underestimated the threat of Rudaj's Albanian mob at first, but the feds started taking them seriously as violence increased in the early 2000s. The FBI and Manhattan's US Attorney's Office have been investigating organized crime jointly through a task force. They began surveilling Rudaj's activities closely around 2001 after the beating at the social club. Investigators soon realized Rudaj was more than just an impulsive thug. He was strategically building a criminal syndicate around an ethnic Albanian network, the first of its kind in New York. After years of gathering evidence through wiretaps, surveillance, and intimidated informants, the feds were ready to dismantle Rudaj's organization. On October 26, 2004, they arrested Rudaj, his underboss, Nardino Colotti, and around 20 other high-ranking members in a massive early morning raid across 3 boroughs. More than 500 federal agents were tapped for the operation, demonstrating how seriously law enforcement took the threat of Rudaj's organization. The raids dealt a crushing blow to the Albanian organized crime groups trying to gain power in New York. It prevented the violence from escalating even further. Following the mass arrests, federal prosecutors disclosed the full extent of Rudaj's criminal empire and brutal tactics through indictments. Rudaj and his top captains faced a litany of charges including racketeering, gambling, extortion, assault, and more. In the end, Rudaj and his top lieutenants were all found guilty and convicted on the racketeering charges. At his sentencing in 2006, the judge chastised 38-year-old Rudaj for choosing a life of greed and violence. He sentenced Rudaj to 27 years in federal prison, acknowledging that he had become one of the most powerful and destructive organized crime figures in New York history. Other high-level members of the Rudaj organization also received lengthy sentences of 20 years or more. The FBI had succeeded in shattering the Rudaj organization just as it reached the peak of its power. Rudaj's reign as New York's feared Albanian-American godfather was over, done in by his own hubris and violence. While Rudaj's time as a mob boss only spanned about a decade before his imprisonment, there's no question he left a significant impact on New York's criminal landscape. At his peak in the early 2000s, he built a formidable criminal empire with over 100 members that matched the strength and reach of even the long-dominant Italian mafia families like the Gambinos and Genoveses. For several years, his Albanian mob operated extensive rackets in Queens, the Bronx, and Westchester with impunity, despite ongoing turf wars with the Italians. He laid out a blueprint for ambitious Albanian gangsters to challenge the Italian mob supremacy moving forward. He proved a Balkan gang could successfully compete with La Cosa Nostra if they matched their viciousness. In prison, he maintained his stature in the criminal underworld. He was considered the elder statesman of the Albanian mob in New York. He had made it known that you still needed to pay respects to him behind bars. According to federal authorities, he continued to wield significant influence from prison through intermediaries on the outside. The FBI closely monitored his communications. In 2011, he allegedly ordered hits on high-ranking Gambino family members from prison using contraband cell phones. He was indicted for orchestrating 2 retaliation murders related to unsanctioned killings of corporation members years prior. While the charges didn't hold up in court due to a lack of direct evidence, it still demonstrated Rudaj's lasting power and willingness to violently settle scores, even while incarcerated. Now in his late 50s, Alex Rudaj remains locked up in a federal penitentiary, likely still managing to pull strings on the outside when possible. He won't be eligible for release until 2031, when he'll be 65 years old. Given his poor health, advanced age, and restrictive parole conditions, it's doubtful he will attempt to re-establish his dominance upon release. But some still believe he'll try to live out his final years in wealth and luxury, financed by hidden away mob money. The classic gangster retirement plan. Regardless, Rudaj's legend is already cemented in New York gangland lore. for a brief but chaotic period in the 1990s and early 2000s, he proved an audacious, ruthless Albanian gangster who could successfully challenge the once invincible Italian Mafia on their own turf. Well, that's all for today on infamous Albanian mobster Alex Rudaj. Do you think newer ethnic mobs will ever surpass the Italians in organized crime? Share your opinions with me below. Don't go anywhere just yet though. More juicy true crime content is on its way for my loyal subscribers.